Alright, I'm going to continue the chipping using the German C black brown. And I've always assumed that C stands for camo, but it might stand for coleslaw or Charlie or, Chevrolet. I don't know. So, whatever. I've thinned it down roughly 1:1 in my palette here. I'm just using, this is actually a Rosemary & Co. Red Dot, size 0. It's one of their synthetic brushes. And I'm going to start just by painting right down the middle of this if I can. My hand is a bit shaky this morning. I'm not sure why. Well, other than the obvious of being old. The older I get, the more they tend to shake. But it's a little shaky. I don't necessarily paint inside of every scratch, and I may not paint fully inside of the ones that I do paint. I may just do part of it. But I just go around, and on the edges I tend to get more of those, because in my mind it makes sense that those would get scratched more. And the choice of this brown color, of course, and I've talked about this before, y'all heard it, is kind of pushing the notion that the metal underneath can rust, that it's ferrous material. If I wanted to push the notion that it was some kind of composite or some kind of metal that did not, was not ferrous, was not something that could rust, then I would want to use something that was gray, steely gray. It could be darker. I tend to, in my mind, just in my mind, I tend to think that the composites would be a darker gray, because the composites I've dealt with from a military armor standpoint tended to be darker gray, and more of a neutral gray or something like that if it were going to be a non-ferrous metallic material. But you can do anything you want. It's your universe. You make it up however you want. So anyway, I'm just going to keep doing this. This is going to take a while. I'm just going to keep doing this and getting these scratches and chips and all of that painted on. And you can see how that looks after getting the chipping on there. I'm pretty happy with that. That'll work. Now, of course, it's going to take a little longer to do all the chipping on the rest of the hull, just because of its size. But I wanted to point out, in these areas where I've got the battle damage, like right here, I just go ahead and paint them in fully. But what you can do, and what I may do, I haven't decided yet. It tends to be an evolving process in my mind. But what you can do is also add in some steely gray, because some of these may be fresher wounds, so to speak. And so adding in that steely gray, even if it's just kind of stippled on, even if it doesn't fully cover the damaged area, will just indicate that it's happened sooner and it hasn't had time to oxidize or to rust or anything like that. So you've got some choices there. And sometimes I also like to think about that, okay, if this is a metallic thing, that when it does get damaged, there's going to be, I guess what you call splash damage, other areas that are going to be a little, where it's going to throw fragments up or something like that. And just give it some additional chips and things like that where it perhaps threw fragments, because when a round hits something like this, the round itself is going to provide some material that's going to be ricocheting around, and the metallic surface that it hits, or whatever surface it hits, whether it's metallic or wood or something like that, there's going to be some kind of fragmentation going on. And I say that firsthand. One time I was in a place where people were shooting at us and we were shooting back, and getting air cover from an AC-130, and its 105 hit a target, and we were danger close, and the fragment, one of the shell fragments from the 105, hit a building, a metal awning on a building behind me. It went from the target, hit behind me, ricocheted off that, and thwacked me pretty good in the back of my flak jacket. Luckily I had on a flak jacket, so other than knocking me over and startling me pretty good, I was okay. But I found it sitting there on the ground, and it was as big as my thumb, just spinning around like an idiot. I tried to pick it up. The daggum thing was just molten hot. But anyway, I know that fragments get spewed around because I have seen it. I don't know if I've ever shown this before. We'll just call this a handy tip, but I like keeping clothespins, just these plain wooden clothespins, sitting up here like this. One, so they're handy to grab if I need to use it to clamp something, but two, after I wash a paintbrush, I just stick it right there and let it dry like that, so it dries point down and in the open air, and preserves the brush a little longer. But I have them positioned all around. You can't see them, but I have them positioned all around over here, so I can dry 4 or 5 brushes at one time. I want to add some rust tones to these damaged areas to give them a feel of age. And there's a lot of things I could use for rust, but just to switch things up, I'm going to use these AK pencils. Now, there's a lot of ways, just as there's a lot of rust products, there's a lot of ways to use these. I just like to stick them over my palette here like this, wet my brush, and just kind of get some of the color off of them. And you see, it's essentially paint from a pencil. And then I just put that on there. It works a little like oils in that you have some working time after you put them on. You can go back and blend them for a period of time, and it works pretty well that way. They're not as flexible as oils, but if you're looking for things that are acrylic or things that are different, or just, something that you go, okay, I want to add to my options. To me, that's what having a product like this is really about. It's just adding to the options that you have with what you can do. I've been surprised at the number of people who contact me and appreciate that I use a wide variety of materials, because they tell me that they have various allergies and things. And that, one guy said that anything that even sniffs of enamels, he has pretty severe reactions to, respiratory reactions, even odorless thinner. He said odorless thinner is odorless, but there's still, when it evaporates, there's still something in the air, and he said it causes him some problems with breathing. So, I like using a wide variety of things. One, just to experience it, but two, I've found it does help people, and that's really what I'm all about. But anyway, you see I'm just dipping it in here, dipping it on the tip, and applying it like that. And then I can wick up excess. I can blend it around once it dries. And once it dries, you can activate it with some work, but generally it's pretty solid. I put some of this on. I knew that I was going to be demonstrating this, and I put some of this on yesterday, and right here on this little piece here. And if I just go in and do a light touch, there's a tiny bit of color that comes off. If I go in and wipe it, you get a tiny bit, but it's fairly permanent. Think of it almost as pigments with built-in fixer. But anyway, it's easy to use. It's fairly flexible. It's more flexible than say an acrylic wash in terms of your ability to clean it up and streak it and things like this. I've tested using it as kind of a dot filter. And these AK pencils work fine that way. Now, in tests against pencils that you get like from the art store that look like this, I've found that there must be something to these that I'm not aware of in terms of ingredients, because when I tested it against, let me see if I have one to show, like something like this Prismacolor pencil. In terms of their application, they both worked well, but in fact, I've never tested this. Let's see, I'll just test it right now. But the AK pencils, they behave differently. See how I'm getting less color off than I do with these? These are much more water aware, I guess you'd say. I don't know. But these Prismacolor pencils, you can draw them on, you can use them. I mean, they work, but they're not as flexible in terms of being able to blend them and smear them and work them with water and things like that. So, and the AK pencils are not, I know I sound like I'm a commercial for AK pencils, but they're not really expensive. I mean, I didn't pay any more for these than I did for these. And in fact, if you find the right place to get them, these can be cheaper. And they come in individuals or sets. I just tended to buy the set so that I would have a wider range of colors, and they were on sale, if I remember right, and that kind of thing. So anyway, I'll just keep applying some of this rust to make these things look a little aged, and then I'll clean my brush off a little and just streak some of that down and just let that dry and then build up some of the color. One other thing I forgot to show when I was rambling on just a second ago is you can use this kind of like a rust wash. Just get it on your brush, put it around the detail like that, and then just go in and wick away any excess, blend it in. It dries a little more transparent than it goes on, so after you work with it a little bit, you'll know how much you can get away with in terms of the intensity of the color wet versus how it's going to look dry. So you can put it on there like that and let that dry and actually use the brush to just blend it in a little bit. It dries really quick, but you could blend it a little like you would with oils, just coming in from the side and blending it just like that. And then just decide how much you want to leave there and how much you want to take away. Here you can see how that rust looks on this back deck. I really like how that turned out. That'll do. I think I'm going to go ahead and get the tracks on at this point because I'm ready to start putting on dust and dirt and other effects. I've still got some rust tones to do around the model, but I can get these tracks on them going to get these on before I go to work today. So you may remember back at the start of this whole build series, I had carved in which side these tracks would go on and their direction to help me remember later that LT means left top. So all I've got to do is just slide that in there, get this wrangled into place, and then get it glued, and it should be good to go. Now to do the others. All right, I've got the tracks in place, so I'm going to start doing some dirt and dust. I'm going to use these Vallejo model washes, the desert dust and European dust. Now, sometimes when I use these, I thin them with water or other thing, because I'm using these green and brown colors on the surface. They'll dry fairly transparent against them, so I'm not gonna thin them down any. I'm just gonna kind of start applying those on with this thin liner brush and just streak them around like that. This is providing kind of an initial dust layer. If it pools anywhere, I can just go in, dry off my brush, touch it with the brush, keep going. Now when the first layer of this dries, it's not going to be real transparent. It'll be the kind of thing that if you look directly at it, you won't really see it. It's only if you hold it in a certain light that you'll start seeing the variation on the surface. But as I've talked about before, using acrylics is an additive process. So I'll just keep building this up, and I'm just working in sections. Right now I'm just going to do this area forward of that stowage, and I'm still to paint the stowage. That'll come in a little bit. But I'm just going to put these on like this. There's a armor modeler, not Night Shift. Another one. Doesn't matter. No need to call them out, but they did a video about, you shouldn't weather your armor with acrylics because they said they dry so fast you don't really have any control over them. But I would make the assertion that it's just the opposite. If you take advantage of the opacity, the fact that they dry very fast can be used to advantage, because I can put stuff on, work an area, and then if I'm just putting on little amounts like I'm doing now, I can continually evaluate it and put color precisely where I want it, knowing that it's going to dry with less opacity than it goes on, and it's going to build up that color. So I can look at this streak right here and say, I don't necessarily need to add anything else there because that's a sufficient streak, but I do want one here. And so you can have great control, obviously, with enamels and oils. But in my experience and I've used enamels and oils extensively over the years, and I like them. But I actually feel like when you start playing to the strengths of acrylics, I actually feel like you have more control, because with enamels and oils, in some way, you're having to work with the fact that it's a subtractive process to kind of keep dialing it to the point that you want it. And I think it can be, especially for newer modelers, it can be a little frustrating if you're not used to how they work. I'm going to switch to this darker color. If you're not used to how they work, it can be a little difficult to adjust to. But with acrylics, I tell people when they're weathering with acrylics, you're just painting. That's really all you're doing. I sometimes poke fun at Mike Rinaldi because he talks about oil paint rendering. And, you know, I joke, you're just painting. And now I know that it helps to have a name for a technique so that we can identify what it is. But really, all this is, oils, enamels, acrylics, any of it, is just painting. You're really just altering the opacity, the value, the hue, all of those other fancy color terms. You're just varying them, and you're putting paint over paint. So don't get hung up about, well, I can't do this, or I shouldn't do that. It's paint. Paint it on. Make it look like you want. If it doesn't, learn from it, evaluate it, look at it logically, and then apply what you've learned to the next model. Must be time to end this video because I'm getting all philosophical here and I'm not actually accomplishing a whole lot. So thank you for being a patron. Thank you for your support of my work. My family and I are grateful for that. And as I always tell you, in this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day. Bye-bye, friends.